Greetings, everyone. I am thrilled to again be in conversation with Mia Feroleto. We spoke a year ago, and it's great to have you back, Mia, and have you update us on some of the amazing work that you've been doing in this past year and what's unfolding. But before we get into our conversation, let me just briefly introduce you to those who don't know you and your work. Mia is really phenomenal, a well-known art advisor, activist, artist, creator of A Shelter from the Storm, Artists for the Homeless in New York, and ARTWALK New York. She's the publisher of New Observations magazine and their podcast. She's a producer of consciousness and contact conferences. And part of what we're going to follow up on today is your incredible work with the Pine Ridge Lakota tribe in regaining the collection of artifacts stolen from the Wounded Knee massacre, and how you're now working on a much more global scale for justice, for artifacts to be returned to the tribes where they belong. Part of what I love about your work, Mia, is you're such a pioneer in guiding us into these Aquarian paradigms that are about justice, truth, coming back into right relationship with each other. So thank you for the work that you're doing and for being in this conversation today.
Oh, Heather, it's my honor and pleasure to be here with you today and to be able to speak to your audience again. It's truly a gift for me. And my Aquarian birthday is this coming Sunday, February 2nd, Groundhog's Day or Imbolc. So it's perfect timing for me to celebrate being here with you again. Thank you so much. I spent 5 months on the Pine Ridge Reservation last year. I drove out on May 1st and returned in early October. And I was very fortunate to stay with my friend Cindy Catches on her property. Cindy was married for 30 years to medicine man Peter Catches, and her father-in-law was legendary medicine man Pete Catches. I lived right down the hill from the oldest Sundance spot on the Pine Ridge Reservation and participated in Sundance this year in July. I basically served as a backup cook because it's 4 days of celebration and ceremony, and hundreds of people come. So there's lots of need in the evenings for meals and at lunchtime too. And to kind of illustrate the symbolism that's happening out there this summer, or that happened out there this past summer. In May, the first white buffalo calf was born in Yellowstone National Park, and Chief Arvil Looking Horse, the keeper of the white buffalo pipe, the white buffalo calf woman pipe, welcomed it into the park and had a naming ceremony for it. And a second white buffalo calf was born last summer at a private farm and given as a gift to the people at Pine Ridge. And Henry Red Cloud welcomed it to Pine Ridge and had a naming ceremony for it. So a white buffalo calf being born is extremely rare. And for two of them to be born during the course of a few months is phenomenal. And in fact, with the birth of the white buffalo calf born in 2012 at the Fay Farm in Connecticut, a very personal note was hit with me because my family is from Connecticut and my mother's maiden name is Fay. And so I had, lots of the foreshadowing that was later to happen in my life as I became more and more involved with the Lakota and the Oglala Sioux tribe.
And tell me the significance of the white calf in terms of the prophecies?
Well, the white buffalo calf are the teachings of the white buffalo calf woman brought the teachings from on high down to the Lakota people about how to live. And basically said, if you're not keeping with the rules, with the laws, you will be destroyed. And in fact, there were two young men whom she met when she arrived. And the first one wanted to seduce her, and he was basically destroyed. And the second one respected her and protected her, and she became the white buffalo calf. So, and he brought the teachings back to the people. So the return of the buffalo has been incredibly important for the Lakota people. As many members of your audience know, the settlers went through a massive effort to slaughter 60 million buffalo to destroy the food source for the Lakota people. And you'll see historic photographs of skulls just piled into a mountain of buffalo skulls. And the fastest way to destroy the people was to take away their source of food. But not only that, for the Lakota, every piece of the buffalo is used. They were the first sustainable people in that nothing went to waste. It was either turned into clothing or weapons, or everything imaginable was used from the buffalo. Nothing was wasted. So in addition to
Everything
these
is
two,
sacred.
and sacred, of course, yes, but everything is sacred to the Lakota. The winged, the four-legged, the grass, the water, mini koju, the water, everything is sacred and respected and loved and appreciated and venerated. And of course, they and all the other indigenous groups are having a horrible time as we continue to desecrate the land and our natural resources and destroy our Mother Earth. But at the end of the Sundance ceremony this past summer at the Ketch's residence, everyone had gone home. People were exhausted after 4 days of celebrating and fasting and praying and dancing. And out of the blue, an entire family of buffalo, a father, a mother, an adolescent, and an infant, came walking down the hill from the Sundance ceremony. So it was the most extraordinary vision to see and to know and to confirm, the new life that's coming in and the changes that are upon us. We may not totally grasp this yet, but how things actually are is not necessarily how they appear. And faith in ourselves and each other and the fact that there is a divine plan for us is so important for us to accept right now in these chaotic times of craziness. I mean, it's really like, it's really like the rattlesnakes are about to commit suicide. I mean, it's a crazy time with people acting out and common sense being thrown out the window. Yet out of that chaos, new life, new growth, a new reality is being born to us all. And as crazy as it is, we just have to hunker down and live through it and know that that's what's on the way for us, that's where we're headed.
Well, as I talk about a lot in my videos, we're at such a critical time in the processional cycle. And we're at the end of the Kali Yuga period of the Yuga cycle, which is the ending of this time of power over, of separation, of destruction, to move into new paradigms, to move into higher consciousness, to move back into understanding what it means to be in right relationship with each other and all of life. And I think I had mentioned to you before we got on the recording, I just recently did an interview with Sean Caulfield, who's looking at this time from the Mayan calendar perspective. And we're really, as we're moving into the Aquarian age, we're moving back into a time of unity consciousness, coming out of this time of separation. And I truly believe, as I know you do also, that it's the Indigenous people who've held on to that wisdom of the sacredness of all of life and of unity consciousness, the awareness that we're all interconnected with all that is. They've held on to that for thousands of years through this dark period on the planet. And I think can guide us back into these new paradigms that allow us to move out of this time of distortion and destruction into co-creating a new world together.
I think that's absolutely true. And at the end of August this year, I participated in the Wild 12 Congress, which takes place every 4 years. This was the 12th Congress in Rapid City, and Indigenous and spiritual leaders from over 40 countries came from around the world to Rapid City for a week to participate in ceremony and prayer and lecture. And I can't stress enough from what I see that the Black Hills is the heart of the world. The Lakota believe that life grew out of the Black Hills. And if you're in the sky, if you're on a plane, you can look down and see the shape of the Black Hills is the shape of a heart. And I energetically just feel, the beating of the heart, like the beating of the drum for the Lakota. It's the pulse, it's the beat, it's the life force. And at the end of August, that was totally evident with this gathering coming to Rapid City, South Dakota, for such a holy and focused event. And then for the Indigenous leaders to go back to their countries and their peoples and share energetically what they've gathered, what they've learned, and draw the interconnecting lines, the energy lines between all of us. And when we look at things, as part of the news, like in November, when the Maori in Parliament, stood up protesting the New Zealand Parliament trying to, break the treaties, break the Maori treaties, and grab the land again. The grabbing the land from the Indigenous people, disrespecting all the agreements that have gone before. The Maori, performed a sacred prayer. The participants got up and danced and expressed and vocalized, and it was just the most powerful thing. And this is what's happening. These old ways of being are infiltrating this facade of structure that's been superimposed on all of us as control factors for us. And people are saying, no more. We're not putting up with this anymore. We have other beliefs. We have other ways that we want to live. And we want to live true to our spiritual natures. I mean, people are demanding to live spiritual lives again. And when you think about the fact that until the 1970s, in America, Indigenous people were not allowed to practice their religion. If they were caught, doing a Sundance ceremony or, God forbid, a ghost dance ceremony, they'd be arrested or thrown into a psychiatric hospital. It was completely illegal for their religion to be practiced for all that time, primarily because people were afraid. The yellow journalism in the 1880s had spread fear across America of people being slaughtered, Indigenous people coming and slaughtering the settlers. not to consider the slaughtering, the reverse slaughtering that was going on all over the country with Indigenous people being killed. For instance, the state of Minnesota ejected all Indigenous people from the state. They were not allowed back across the border into the state of Minnesota. And one of the main massacres that happened in Minnesota was because the settlers had traded with the Dakota people for land in exchange for food, because the leaders of the Dakota had feared that their tribal members would starve over the winter. So they traded land for food, and the settlers reneged on giving the food to them. So their people were starving anyway, and they went to take the food, and fighting ensued. And ultimately the Dakota were put to death, but it was because they hadn't kept their side of the bargain and the people were starving. So the government of Minnesota made it illegal for the Dakota to come back into the state of Minnesota when this was their tribal land. It's one atrocity after another when you really take a look at what's gone on historically. And it's not that we can go back and rewrite history, but it's only in acknowledging the truth of what actually occurred that real change can take place.
And setting things right that we can set right, like this profound work
Yes.
done in getting these artifacts back to the tribe where they belong from that Wounded Knee massacre. But also, as we were talking about before, I think it's significant that here in the United States, we're now in our Chiron return. And in the chart, Chiron is in Aries in the fourth house. And I think some of this Chiron return is guiding us as a nation to heal some of these wounds inflicted on the Indigenous people in our starting our country. And I think this is a time where, as we're moving into the Aquarian age, that we can't undo the trauma of the past, but we can help to heal it by taking responsibility and then acting to bring healing, restitution where we can, come back into right relationship with each other.
Absolutely.
And say some about what you're doing in terms of working with the Vatican around this.
Well, I have a lot to say about the Vatican because I grew up Catholic, and my mother went to grammar school, Catholic grammar school, with a young boy who became a Monsignor and ultimately a close family friend, who became the Vicar General of the Diocese of Bridgeport. And we grew up with him at our house, and my brothers went to Catholic high school. I did as well, but they went to Fairfield Prep. And our family friend was responsible for moving the pedophiles from parish to parish. And a number of my brother's teachers in high school were also pedophiles. And, they would come to our beach house in the summer. Fortunately, my family donated money to the church, quite a bit of it. So my brothers were not interfered with, but many of their friends were. And the family friend molested my older brother's best friend. And it's a very unhappy, unhealthy scenario that went on for decades. And for those who've seen the movie Spotlight covering the story in Boston, Massachusetts, there were 80,000 boys who were molested, and Bridgeport is a comparable number, 80,000 boys who were molested by the Catholic priests in the diocese. So I wrote to St. Francis. I have a particular beef, as it were, because I don't believe that Jesus Christ created the Catholic Church. And I'm a strong believer that following in his footsteps requires, helping the poor and eliminating poverty. And many years ago, in the 1960s, 1968, I was greatly influenced by a movie called The Shoes of the Fisherman. And I've actually written about it, but in the movie, Anthony Quinn plays a bishop who'd been in a concentration camp in Russia for 20 years. And the Russian officer who ran the place decided he wanted him out because he wanted someone who might have good things to say about him free, a good possible, source of good publicity. And he went to the Vatican. He ends up at the Vatican, and through fate, he winds up becoming the next pope. The pope dies, and Anthony Quinn's character becomes pope. And this Russian, played by Sir Laurence Olivier, contacts him because China is about to experience extreme famine, and he's hoping that the Pope can intervene. And he arranges a meeting for very high up in the Chinese government, the Pope and himself. And the Chinese representative says to the Pope, you're about to go back to the Vatican and your comfortable life, your life of luxury. If I go back to China empty-handed, I'll be killed. What is it that you're prepared to do to help solve the problems? Because if there's famine, there will be war. And ultimately, Anthony Quinn's character, whose name in the movie is Kiri Lakota, of all things, decides to give away the wealth of the Catholic Church to the world, which is exactly what I believe Pope Francis should be doing before he dies. And in February, I reproduced in color my article about the shoes of the fisherman and a letter to Pope Francis describing the pedophilia in the Catholic Church that my family has experienced firsthand, and the fact that he, truly following in the footsteps of Jesus Christ, needs to give away the wealth of the Catholic Church. And I made copies for the entire group of cardinals, bishops, and archbishops in America and sent them to everyone when I sent to the Pope.
You are you are courageous.
And I said, it's time to walk the talk. It's time, and I have not heard back from him yet, but now that the artifacts from Wounded Knee many of them are back and others are returning, I'm turning my focus to the artifacts that are in the Vatican's collection because they all need to go home as well. I just want to encourage people to think for a moment that all of these museums are filled with stolen artifacts. I'm not talking about contemporary painting or paintings that were done 150 years ago, but historic artifacts. You can bet that they're spoils of war in one form or another, and they were stolen. The Elgin marbles at the British Museum were taken from the Greeks and have to be returned. They don't belong in Britain. And all of these artifacts, many of which contain human remains, have to be given back, have to be properly buried or respected and done whatever, spiritual activities need to be done around them so that they're laid to rest. And each of these items contains another dimension, the dimension of the person that it owned it, but also the dimension of that world, that culture that it was taken out of. And as these items go home, there is a justice, there is a righteousness that is returned not only to the people who are receiving it back after God knows how many years, but there is an innate letting go or forgiveness of what was stolen, what was not respected, what has no place being in someone else's possession. And as these things go back energetically, so many things will begin to shift in terms of how things work in the world. I mean, I know myself when I lived in Wasta, South Dakota, Wasta, the little town of Wasta, which is 22 people, was the center of all the sacred sites out there. The sites all revolved around Wasta. And coincidentally, when I moved there, I found my little efficiency apartment on Craigslist. It turned out that that was the exact space that the Val Kilmer character lived in the movie Thunderheart. And, that's about the Leonard Peltier story, but it's also about the feds mining for uranium on the Pine Ridge reservation, stealing the natural resources of the people. And it talks specifically about the Val Kilmer character, who's half-breed, coming to help his people in these troubled times. So for me to land in that exact place as my place to live for a year was pretty profound. But so many things like that happen for me. And out there, it's so clear that spirit is just, moving me from place to place and guiding me and so forth. It's just astonishing.
Well, and you're
So
writing a book about this that will be published and potentially a film. And you've really been a bridge builder and someone who's moving between these worlds culturally and helping be an advocate for justice and for things to be set right. Because some of what you've talked about also and written about in New Observations is the generational trauma, the ancestral trauma for these indigenous tribes who've lost their land, lost their artifacts, lost their deep connection to what's sacred to them. And this is part of the healing that we can do as we're moving back into right relationship and healing these wounds from the past.
absolutely. And the young people need to be given a sense of possibility and hope. They need to know that their lives are open to whatever it is they dream to create for themselves, and that they, in fact, can achieve these things. It doesn't have to be that they're stuck repeating the same patterns again and again and again. There's so much intelligence and humor and talent and creativity out there. The beauty is just so extreme. And, again, one step at a time, this can be built and established I believe I may have talked about this last time we had a conversation, but I'm about to turn 69 and I live on my Social Security. And, I've had a pretty successful career doing large scale special events and so forth. But once I decided to live off my Social Security and be totally content with a modest lifestyle, I have done the best work of my life. I have total freedom. My bills are paid every month. I don't have to worry about it. And I can create whatever I want and whatever I'm called to do, really, because inspiration is such a big part of how I go about every day, because literally I am called, and the ancestors lived with me for a year when I worked on the return of the artifacts. I mean, some days it felt like I couldn't even walk in my room because, there were so many spirits packed in there, giving me messages. But that is how we're supposed to live. We're not supposed to have these 9 to 5 jobs. We're supposed to pay attention to what fills us up, to what stimulates us, and what we feel excited about and what we bring our love to, and then bring that to the world. And if anything, I've learned that we have to, as an Aquarian as well, it's time to change the way things are done. In my opinion, and that of a lot of other people, we need a universal basic income. We need for people to have basic human rights of housing and education and medical care across the board. And so that they can decide what it is they're excited about, what they want to commit themselves to, what they're good at, and develop their lives accordingly based on what they're attracted to, what their talents, show for their futures, and what they're enthusiastic about. I mean, our enthusiasm gives us so much information. Not only that, but the gas to run it on, the gas to get there, to make it happen. And all this control has been imposed on us in a way that's the exact opposite of how we should be living, what we should be doing.
Well, it fosters a survival mentality, and what you're describing is a way, and I think this is what the Aquarian paradigms are about, how we can move into a way of being where there's mutual respect and collaboration, equality, so that we can be each connecting to our unique gifts and our purpose here, and bringing those gifts into community, and really then seeing how we all can thrive in that way.
I watched the most wonderful interview with the British actor Michael Sheen about a month ago. He was talking about how he had been pulled in to get involved with a rugby team in Britain or Scotland. And the money that they had raised for the game disappeared somehow. So they weren't going to be able to do it. And I'm not remembering exactly if some of these people, or if these people were handicapped in some way, but the money was gone. So the program was going to have to be canceled. The event was going to have to be canceled. And he sold his house to pay for this event. And he said this was the biggest experience of his life, because everything changed in his thinking, in the way he approached everything, in what he saw as valuable. It just gave him the vision and the shift in attitude to arrange for him to see his whole world in new terms. And personally, I believe that that's what's going to be happening again and again and again for people on the planet, because that is where our strength lies. And that is where real fellowship begins and ends, where we know that we have each other's backs. We know we're there for each other. And what a different world it's going to be then,
Absolutely. And prior to being in this past 5,000 years of power over the patriarchal period, where it's become survival of the fittest and conquer or be conquered, prior to that, in the age of Taurus, it was a time of such community and creativity. And it's not like we're going back to the past, but I think we can tap on some of the indigenous wisdom of other ways of life, and the cultures of the sacred feminine that knew that energetic of being in right relationship, and bring it forward to guide us in coming back into balance in this time and moving into more creativity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the thing too, Heather. It's all right there for us. We have it. We have the solutions. um, all we have to do is look at things from a slightly different perspective. We know it's wrong. We know, the current state of affairs is not correct for any of us, and it has to be safe for us to express that to each other. Which is why grassroots community organizing is so important, because we can make a difference. And the Taughtness England sustainability community is really like that. The entire place runs on enthusiasm. The whole town of Taughtness is totally self-sustainable, and everything runs, from a place of togetherness and working together and living together. And we can do that. We really can create just such a thing, if we're willing to.
Well, and I think what's so important, what you're saying, is there are these transition towns and communities that are now being established all over the globe. There are programs like People's Health Alliance that are starting a whole new medical health care system. That I think the key is not to try to reform the paradigms of the past, but to create these new paradigms of economies, of healthcare, of education that are moving into the new paradigms, and really honor our capacity to see these new ways of being and co-create them together. Then we don't get, I think part of what we have to break out of is this kind of perpetrator victim polarity that we're caught in so many areas around the globe, and reclaim our empowerment as people to stand for truth and justice and right relationship and co-create these new communities together.
Absolutely. And to tear something down, it takes too much effort. To just build up something new, to create something new is the way to go, and just transform, transform ourselves. Just pick up in the new phase with the new attitude, as opposed to undo, just build up. You're absolutely right. It takes way too much effort to try to undo something that's had its day, and it's time for a new beginning.
And talk some, Mia, about what you've done for artists, because I mean you're a gifted artist yourself, but you've got this Adopt an Artist program. Part of why I think that what you're doing in terms of supporting art and artists is that I really see artists, musicians, storytellers, creators as those that can help seed the new paradigms, the new stories, the new ways of seeing things. And I think that's a critical part of this shift that we're in.
Well, the arts are a doorway to the divine. They're a doorway to our higher selves, and we're all artists. Whichever art form we connect with, we're all creative people, and every single one of us has gifts which are untapped for lack of time or lack of training, or just busy being preoccupied with something else. But I have been working on the idea of the Adopt an Artist program for about 10 years, and it's now that the world is ready for such a thing. And I am writing a book on the return of the artifacts, but it also has to do with my life as an activist and an artist, and the fact that taking the artifacts and culture, and then the artists with the Adopt an Artist program, they're kind of two sides of similar issues. I mean, one is historic, but the other is really about foundational life and energy and creativity springing up all the time. I mean, I often think that my art education taught me to think outside of the box. All of my problem solving comes from being an artist, because artists create from nothing every day. And anything that I have to confront or deal with and find a solution, I think of it as simply that, like being creative and making something happen. I consider my work in the world to be how I make art these days. It's my art making for sure. But I have been incredibly fortunate, and again, spirit has played its role in this. I am being represented by Creative Artists Agency, which is the biggest creative agency in the world. They represent people like Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks, and many, many of the top musicians and actors and directors are represented by Creative Artists Agency. And they're representing me with my book and about the artifacts, the return of the artifacts, and again, my work as an activist and my life in general. And we are in discussion about a film and/or documentary series, not only about the repatriation of the artifacts, but also about the Adopt an Artist program. And I had said to my agent that nothing could be more appropriate than launching the Adopt an Artist program with the Creative Artists Agency Foundation, because every one of their clients, including me, has transformed their lives through art. And the idea, I mean, I don't want to give too much away, but I will be meeting with the foundation shortly when I go into the city. And the artists will be welcomed into people's homes to live for a period of time, and they will make art while they're there. They'll have a place to live and a place to work. And as we all know, the arts have been slashed from the school system all over the place. There's, children need to be exposed to the arts to tap into their own creativity and be inspired and express, what they have inside of them. So to have this all working together will just be a phenomenal opportunity for everyone. And it's also changing the way we look at art, because since the 1980s, not so dissimilar to the museums with the artifacts that were stolen, the art world has become perverted. To have a painting worth $100 million, Van Gogh never sold a painting in his life, yet his paintings are valued, at over $100 million. There's something a little off about that. So art has to return to where it was historically, and that is as a part of daily life in Greek and Roman culture. And beauty needs to be understood. Philosophy needs to be thought about and considered. These are all things that humanity, a human being, needs in their daily life to live a fulfilled life, to live a happy existence. And I believe this program will help to facilitate that. And it's only now, I believe, that we're on the brink of people beginning to understand that more people are suffering. There's no reason for anyone to be suffering around the globe. I mean, the fires in California are bringing it home. It's horrible that people have to go through that loss. But what about the several billion people who are living with that kind of loss in a slightly different form every day of their lives? It's time for us to understand we are, in fact, our brother's keepers. You know, we can make a difference in the lives of someone else so that their lives have some comfort. You know, there's just no reason for it anymore. And animals are more considerate of each other at times than we are. You know, animals show more compassion towards each other than human beings do. You know, when we look at what's been going on in Gaza for, you know, more than a year, and that we have not stopped that, even though the whole world is calling for it to be stopped. These things are wrong, and it's time for us to make a stand and say, this is wrong. I do not want our country to be associated with this and support this. But we have to be willing to make a risk, take the risk, and make a stand and say, I won't support this anymore. It's not acceptable. Who are we supporting with all this bloodletting? I ask that question time and again. What needs the shedding of human blood on this, at this level? What are we feeding? You know, and why are we allowing that to happen? It's not acceptable.
Well, and I think part of what's so tragic is that, and I truly believe as we're moving into this new phase in the processional cycle and as we're moving out of the Kali Yuga, while we're seeing this accelerated time of awakening and movement into higher consciousness and healing, we're also, from my perspective, seeing the last gasp of the darkest of the dark of humanity playing out on the planet. And I feel like a lot of these tragedies going on around the world and wars are the outgrowth of this collective trauma that we've inflicted on each other for 5,000 years. And we're also caught now in a mentality as humanity that is so embroiled in that paradigm of separation and power over that keeping wars going fuels the military industrial complex and fills the pockets of billionaires. And
Exactly.
part of what you're saying that I think is so important is when we can shift our perspective and really come back into that ancient indigenous understanding, and it's the modern Aquarian understanding that we're all interconnected. When we harm another, we harm ourselves. When we harm the earth, we harm ourselves. That everything is sacred and everything is interconnected. And when we can wake up to that and stand in the truth of that, it changes every action we take. And part of what I love and what you're doing in your work is what you do across the board is so infused with that understanding, that sense of justice and truth and right relationship. And, I think that you also, I know you're a mystic and that your whole life has been about being on this spiritual path. And part of what I love is your actions reflect that. And even your understanding of art reflects that art should not be a commodity to be sold to leverage someone's making a profit. It is the beauty and the creative expression of humanity. And it, in ancient times, was so much a part of our sacred ceremonies and our expression of our love for the cosmos and our connection with the earth and the beauty of all that is. That is some of what we're trying to come back to. But we so have to, from my perspective, heal and clear these distorted, destructive power over paradigms from the past and allow ourselves to see each other and the world in a new way. And then we can co create this very different way of being.
I think that I I listened for a number of years to you and Pam you and Pam Gregory have your amazing talks. And when you talk about Aquarius and the water bearer and so forth, I'm always reminded of the pouring of the sacred water, down to all of us. And my image has been for quite a number of years that humanity is not absorbing the water that we need to absorb. So we're having floods and
Wow.
tsunamis and all of that because we're supposed to absorb it. This is part of our enlightenment, to take in the water and allow ourselves to be purified and cleansed and raise our vibration, but instead we're blocking this. And the water is so vital. And the Lakota know that, the water is so sacred, the most sacred thing. And Mini Wachoni. And we just have to stop and let this information wash over us. And that's what Aquarius, is about. And pay attention, the things that you can learn about yourself just from moments of quiet introspection, sitting with yourself and understanding, frequency, your own frequency and vibration, and how your day is impacted by them and what you're putting out to others, by them. Change can happen in an instant, if you're willing to flow. And that's what the water, again, it's all about. It's about letting that water flow. And it's just, I feel so lucky to be an Aquarian at this moment in time. I really do.
Well, and tied in with what you're saying, Mia, I think the earth herself is in a process of purification and transformation and is really trying to guide us in waking up. And that the energies of the sky are trying to guide us in waking up. And I love that in the last 20 years or so, the new planetary bodies that have been discovered, the Kuiper Belt objects, are more and more named after indigenous creation deities. When new planetary bodies are discovered and named, it shows that something is emerging in a more significant way in our human consciousness. And I think that's very significant that we're now realizing we need to respect and remember that ancient indigenous wisdom. We need to remember our origins and how this earth is so guiding us back into that memory of who we are, of who we can be when we come back into that remembrance of the sacredness of all of life. And then we can move into this higher consciousness and this higher level of creativity and co-create new ways of being together. So it's right here, but we have to honor going through this liminal time and this cleansing. I love what you're saying, that part of the meaning of this time is a time of purification, to release these destructive patterns and to cleanse ourselves of the trauma of the past, to dare to step forward in new ways. Is there any other advice that you have for people as we're in this transition? Because you've been such a model, Mia, for standing in truth, in compassion, in justice, and daring to see things in a different way and to speak truth to power and to work to set wrongs right and bring healing to where there needs to be healing on the planet. But any other advice you have for people before we close about how they can step into that themselves?
Well, thank you so much for saying that, Heather. I'm a mixed bag, I can be, I can be a lot to deal with. I don't know how else to say that. but I encourage people to pay attention to what they feel strongly about. I have I'm an Aquarian with Libra rising, so my early years were trying to keep things in balance as a Libra rising, and in my 20s I realized that was just impossible. I couldn't do what I needed to do if I was going to try to keep everything balanced. So I trusted the information that I was being given, and some of my friends who have known me now for 30 or 40 years laugh and say, you're just like you've always been, which they have an appreciation for, but not everyone does, because I can be a pain in the butt for sure. But really tell the truth. I can't stress enough the importance of that. Don't be worried about offending someone. And if it's a little clumsy the way you express yourself, have trust that you'll be able to get through it and articulate, you know, as clearly as you can. But it's a dialogue, you have to be in conversation with another. And if the person is only willing to keep your relationship at a certain level, that's something to pay attention to also. But tell the truth about how you feel, and don't be intimidated or afraid to express what your real thoughts are and what your real feelings are, because that is where we will find compassion for each other and open the door for change.
Mm.
Like with the artifacts, when I drove over to Barre for the first time, many people had driven to Barre over more than 100 years asking for the artifacts to be returned, and nothing happened. And had I gone with the same attitude, Spirit told me there has to be a new sheriff in town. There has to be a new message. It can't be the way that it's been, because it's not going to work. And, we had a very contentious meeting, our first meeting. And, there are people there who, some people really like me, and some people there really don't. But the reality is, they had to be told the truth. It's not acceptable for you to hang on to sacred items that someone else treasures, and you don't belong, they don't belong with you. I mean, wake up. So speak the truth, but pay attention, and to have resources like you with your incredible knowledge of astrology to share the aspects. The planets are so important right now to understand the transits and how things are shifting, and the monthly cycles of the moon, the rotations through the signs. And also pay attention to simple little things like your name, the vibration of your name, the anagrams for your name, and what they tell you about yourself. I mean, the anagram for Mia is I am. I mean, how much more basic, could it be? So I just think there are so many little things, and surround yourself with beauty. Look at an original work of art. It doesn't have to be expensive. Go to a local college or community college, and look at the student art and spend $50 and buy an original work of art and live with it and have it speak to you every day. And play the music that really makes you feel elevated, makes your spirit soar, because these are all the things that every day you're going to integrate into your daily life and benefit from yourself, and the people around you will benefit from those things too.
Mm. That's great, Mia. And I think the other thing that's woven in how you've lived your life that I think is a role model for us also is follow your heart. Follow your heart, listen to your own inner knowing, and really honor we all have our spirit guides and helpers who are trying to support us in living more in alignment with our hearts, with our soul selves. And when we take enough time to listen and open to them and call on them, we can get that support and that guidance. And I think that's really critical for all of us in this time, because we are in a time of mystery. We are in this liminal time. And we won't find those answers outside of ourselves. And the more that we can listen to our own inner knowing and really honor our own soul's connection with the cosmos and with our spirit guides, we will know what right steps we need to take to be living out the truth of our own lives.
I think that's completely true, Heather. And the universe is there to support us on every level. All the kingdoms, all the animals, all the realms, they're all there. And we just need to trust that they're there for us. And I mean, I can't even count the number of times that things have just manifested instantaneously or within an hour, physical things that I might have needed at a given moment that, there they are. And it's not just me, it's all of us. We're here as children of the divine, and we're here, especially now in these challenging times. We're here to do our work. We all came in with something specific that we wanted to do, and the support is there for each and every one of us to get it done. So let's get it done.
And support each other in doing that.
Yes.
Thank you, Mia. Thank you for all the work that you're doing and for being in this conversation.
Oh, thank you, Heather. Right back at you.
And thank you to this community for how we are supporting each other in this transition time and really moving into co-creating a new world together.